It was supposed to be a proud moment, 17-year-old Jasmine Cole standing alone at gate 34, returning home from a prestigious team leadership conference. Dressed neatly, passport in hand, and a valid ticket clutched tightly, she was ready for takeoff. But in a matter of seconds, that pride turned into public humiliation when a flight attendant named Gloria looked her over, questioned the legitimacy of her ticket, and then, right there in front of dozens of passengers, ripped it in half. What Gloria didn't know. Jasmine's father was Elliot Cole, the silent majority owner of the airline. What followed wasn't just a confrontation, it sparked a corporate reckoning. This isn't just a story about prejudice, it's about how a torn ticket turned into a movement that could reshape an entire company. Want to know how Jasmine went from being dismissed at the gate to addressing the board of directors? Stick around till the end, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. Jasmine Cole's sneakers tapped softly against the polished floor of Terminal B as she rolled her carry-on behind her, heading toward gate 34. Her pulse was quick, not from fear, but from that tingling kind of excitement that comes with doing something grown-up for the first time. 17 years old, smart, focused, and fresh off a 3-day teen leadership conference in Denver, she was headed home to Atlanta. Her parents had trusted her to make the trip alone, and so far, everything had gone smoothly. She adjusted the strap on her small backpack and glanced up at the digital display, Flight 682, on time. She smiled. Everything was right on schedule. Jasmine wasn't flashy. She wore a light blue button-down tucked into fitted jeans, her curly hair pulled back into a low bun. A silver necklace with the letter J sparkled softly against her collarbone. Clutched in her hand was her boarding pass, issued through her father's corporate travel office. Her passport, more for ID than necessity, was tucked inside her pocket. As she approached the counter, she saw the gate agent, a middle-aged woman with frosty blonde hair and a crisp uniform. Her name tag read Gloria. Jasmine offered her a polite smile. "Hi, good afternoon," she said. "I'm here to check in for Flight 682 to Atlanta." Gloria looked up, her eyes skating quickly over Jasmine's face, then down to her chest, where her name tag from the conference still hung. Without returning the smile, she held out her hand for the ticket. Jasmine handed it over, still smiling, though she could already feel a chill in Gloria's demeanor. Something about the woman's narrowed eyes made her instinctively straighten her posture. Gloria scanned the ticket. Then she scanned it again. Her expression shifted. "This ticket looks suspicious," she said flatly. Jasmine blinked. "I'm sorry." "I said," Gloria repeated louder, "this ticket doesn't look valid." Several passengers nearby turned to glance at them. Jasmine felt her stomach drop slightly but kept her voice steady. "I'm pretty sure it's valid. My father's office booked it through the airline's executive account this morning." Gloria gave her a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sure he did. Look, young lady, I've seen this before, people trying to sneak onto flights using fake tickets or expired credentials. Happens more than you think." Jasmine's face flushed, heat rushing up her neck. "Ma'am, I assure you." "I don't need assurances," Gloria snapped, raising her voice. "I need a real ticket." Without warning, she held the paper in both hands and tore it in half. The sound was sharp, final, and echoed louder than it should have. Jasmine's breath caught. Around her, the terminal noise continued, but time seemed to pause. The gate agent had just destroyed her only boarding pass. Her only way home. "What are you doing?" she gasped. "That's my ticket." Gloria waved her away with the back of her hand, as if swatting a fly. "Move along. I'm not letting you board with a fraudulent ticket. You can go find a real one if you want to get on that flight." People were watching now, some with pity, some with awkward discomfort, and a few with silent curiosity. Jasmine's face burned. She could feel tears threatening, but she wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She stepped away from the counter, heart pounding in her ears. She looked at the torn pieces in her hand and pulled out her phone. She didn't want to call her father. She hated pulling that card. He'd always told her, "Jazz, earn your way. People may not know who you are, and that's okay. Let your character speak first." But this wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was deliberate humiliation. She tapped his number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey sweetheart, boarding already?" "No," she said softly, trying to keep her voice even. "There's a problem." There was a pause. "What kind of problem?" She said my ticket was fake. She tore it up in front of everyone. Just ripped it in half and told me to go buy another one." Another pause. His tone shifted. "Where exactly are you standing right now?" "Gate 34, near the check-in desk." "I'll handle it. Don't move." She ended the call and walked to a nearby window, clutching the torn halves of her ticket. She stared out at the tarmac, watching planes glide slowly toward the runway. Her father had always been calm under pressure. A former Air Force pilot turned airline mogul, Elliot Cole wasn't one to throw his weight around, but he was the majority owner of Blue Horizon Air. And Gloria had just publicly humiliated his daughter. Back in Atlanta, Elliot stood from his leather chair, jaw tight. Without a word to his assistant, he strode out of his 18th floor office and into a waiting company car. His destination, the airport. Jasmine sat silently, watching Gloria process other passengers with false politeness. Each time their eyes met, Gloria's expression was still smug. Jasmine stayed seated, waiting. 40 minutes later, she got a text from her father, "I'm here. Meet me at the information kiosk." She stood tall, slipped the torn ticket into her bag, and walked past Gloria, offering a brief nod, which Gloria didn't return. Her father stood in front of a departures board in a gray suit, neat but not flashy. His presence alone turned heads. Jasmine approached, and as soon as she saw him, her composure cracked just a little. "She tore up my ticket, Dad," she said quietly. "Just like that. Like I didn't belong here." He nodded, jaw still set. "Let's take care of this." Together, they returned to Gate 34. Several employees spotted Elliot and quickly straightened up. One even whispered something to a colleague. The gate supervisor, a man in his early 60s named Richard, hurried over. "Mr. Cole," he said nervously. "Good afternoon. Is there a problem?" Elliot's tone was polite but firm. "Yes. My daughter's boarding pass was destroyed by your employee. I'd like to know why." Richard looked at Jasmine, then the crumpled pieces in her hand. He turned pale. That's highly unprofessional." "Who?" "I did," Gloria's voice cut in. She stepped forward, trying to maintain authority. "I found the ticket suspicious. We've had incidents before." "And so your response," Elliot said calmly, "was to rip it up in front of a crowd, instead of verifying it properly?" Gloria's mouth opened and closed, struggling. I acted in good faith." Elliot raised a hand. "You acted on bias. And you humiliated my daughter. There's no good faith in that." Richard quickly offered to speak in private. They moved to a staff area behind the desk. Gloria followed, less confident now. Once seated, Elliot outlined the situation: a valid ticket booked through his executive office, confirmed and logged. Gloria offered a thin apology. Jasmine accepted it, but not without reminding her of the impact. This wasn't just about a ticket. It was how you made me feel, like I didn't belong here. There was no argument left. Richard promised disciplinary action. A new ticket was issued, first class. Later, over coffee in the airport lounge, Elliot asked, "Are you all right?" Jasmine nodded slowly. "I am. But this can't be the end of it." She shared an idea: a comprehensive bias and diversity training program, real stories, real learning, not just check-the-box sessions. Elliot listened. He agreed. Together, they began outlining a plan to bring it to the airline board. Jasmine didn't want revenge. She wanted change. Something meaningful. Something that could protect the next kid from being treated like she was. And with her father's support, she intended to make it happen. The morning after the airport incident, the Cole household stirred to life in quiet waves. Their Atlanta home, a brick colonial with wide porches and magnolia trees flanking the driveway, usually hummed with laughter and routine. But today, there was a different kind of energy, calm on the surface, focused underneath. Jasmine sat at the breakfast table, slowly stirring her oatmeal though she hadn't touched a bite. Her mind wasn't on breakfast, it was racing ahead. Her father's words from the night before echoed in her thoughts. If we do this, he'd said, we do it right. Not just a statement, but something lasting. Angela Cole, Jasmine's mother, stepped in with a warm smile and a plate of scrambled eggs. She was a quiet powerhouse herself, former nonprofit director, now a part-time consultant in community development. She could tell something was brewing in her daughter's mind. You didn't sleep well, Angela said gently. Not really, Jasmine admitted. Too much on my mind. I kept going over it all, what she said, how she looked at me like I didn't belong. And then how everyone just watched. Angela sat beside her. It's a hard feeling, Jazz. That kind of sting stays with you. But you handled it with grace. Not everyone would have stood their ground the way you did. Jasmine nodded slowly. It just feels like, maybe it happened for a reason. Maybe I'm supposed to do something about it. Elliot entered the kitchen in a crisp blue shirt, holding his iPad, already mid-conversation with someone on the other end of a video call. He gave Jasmine a wink and set the tablet down. I was just speaking with the airline's general counsel, he said. They've officially suspended Gloria pending a full investigation. Richard's assembling internal reports. He's also asked for our recommendation on next steps. That's good, Angela said. But what about training? Is anyone talking about that? They will be, Elliot replied, turning to Jasmine. Because you're going to tell them. Jasmine blinked. Me? You said you wanted to turn this into something meaningful. I think you should lead the initiative. I'll support it, but it should come from you. The idea landed in her chest like a small spark. She thought of her conference friends, Kayla from Dallas who ran a school mentoring program, Devin from Chicago who'd started a youth podcast about social justice. They'd all talked about change. Now she had a chance to make it real. She pushed her oatmeal aside. Okay. Then we need a plan. For the rest of the morning, the dining room transformed into a strategy hub. Jasmine pulled out her conference notebook, full of ideas, notes from seminars, quotes scribbled in the margins like, inclusion is not a gesture, it's a responsibility. She began sketching a framework, core modules, real-life scenario workshops, reflective journaling, and post-training evaluations. Angela chimed in with insights from her nonprofit experience. If you want it to stick, you need more than a one-time seminar. There should be ongoing reinforcement. Maybe monthly check-ins or team discussions. Elliot offered structure from the corporate side. It has to be scalable. We have over 22,000 employees across 5 continents. Let's start with a pilot program, say, 200 staff, then expand. By noon, Jasmine had a working outline. She decided to call it clear: compassion, listening, education, awareness, and respect. The program wouldn't shame people, it would educate and challenge them to examine unconscious bias and cultivate empathy. Later that afternoon, she scheduled a video call with Kayla and Devin. When she explained what had happened at the airport, they were stunned, but instantly supportive. We're with you, Devin said. Whatever you need. Kayla grinned. This is what we trained for. Let's make this real. By the end of the call, they had divided tasks. Kayla would draft the bias awareness modules, Devin would gather data on effective DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, practices in the airline industry, and Jasmine would prepare the presentation deck and speak with the airline's HR leadership team. The next day, Jasmine and Elliot sat in a sleek boardroom at Blue Horizon's Atlanta headquarters. Around the table sat 8 senior executives, including the head of human resources, the chief operations officer, and Cynthia Rhodes, a longtime board member known for her pragmatic but principled approach. Elliot opened the meeting, but quickly handed the floor to Jasmine. "I'm not here to talk about what happened to me," Jasmine began, her voice steady. "I'm here to talk about what can happen next." She laid out the clear program in detail. She didn't just speak from emotion, she spoke from research, citing FAA compliance policies, industry trends, and employee satisfaction metrics. She included stories from her peers and emphasized that the training would not only improve morale, but protect the brand's long-term integrity. Cynthia leaned forward. "This is impressive, Jasmine. How quickly can we roll this out?" "We'd like to start with a 2-month pilot," Jasmine replied. "Volunteers from customer-facing departments, flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service reps, then we'd collect feedback, revise the modules, and prepare for a system-wide launch." The HR director, Mr. Langston, flipped through the printed proposal. "Do you envision this being mandatory?" Jasmine met his eyes. "Eventually, yes. Bias isn't limited to a few bad apples. If we're serious about safety and service, then we need to be serious about fairness too." There was a pause. Then Cynthia smiled. "Well said." Within a week, the board approved the pilot program. Jasmine was appointed as a special advisor to the DEI committee. Kayla and Devin received consultant contracts. And Elliot? He stepped back, offering support from behind the scenes, careful not to overshadow his daughter's work. The first pilot group included 50 flight attendants, 30 customer service agents, and 20 supervisors. The training sessions were held in person at regional hubs, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, and via Zoom for international staff. Jasmine opened each session herself, sharing a version of her story, not in anger, but in truth. Some participants were receptive. One gate agent admitted she'd never realized how often she subconsciously treated young black passengers with more suspicion. A flight attendant named Mark said the role-playing exercises were eye-opening. "I didn't think I had bias," he said, "but this made me look in the mirror." Of course, not everyone embraced it. "I've been doing this job for 20 years, one employee huffed. "I don't need some teenager telling me how to treat people." But those voices were fewer than Jasmine had expected. In follow-up surveys, over 80% of participants said the training changed how they viewed passenger interactions. Over 60% said it helped reduce misunderstandings and improve team communication. One email stuck with her. It came from a flight attendant named Denise. "Jasmine, I just wanted to say thank you. After taking Clear, I realized I was holding on to assumptions I wasn't even aware of. I treated passengers differently based on how they dressed or talked. This program made me want to do better, not because I was told to, but because I understood why it mattered. You've changed the way I see my job, and myself." By month's end, the pilot was complete. Jasmine compiled the data, success stories, and challenges into a final presentation. She and Elliot returned to the boardroom, this time joined by Kayla and Devin on video call. The boardroom was fuller now, several directors, legal advisors, and department heads. Jasmine stood at the front of the room, confident but not boastful. "Clear is more than a training. It's a commitment to the people who trust us to treat them with respect. The fact that I'm here at all proves that this work is needed. We can't fix the world overnight, but we can start with our corner of it." When the board voted, it was unanimous. Clear would become a mandatory program across the entire company. Every Blue Horizon employee, from the CEO to baggage handlers, would complete it within the next 6 months. Training would be refreshed annually and adapted for different cultures and teams around the globe. As the meeting ended, Elliot placed a hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "I'm proud of you. Not just because you stood up, but because you built something better out of it." Jasmine smiled softly. "You always said character is louder than status. I guess now we're proving it." That evening, as the sun dipped low over the Atlanta skyline, Jasmine sat on the back porch, laptop open, notebook beside her. There was still work to do, more sessions to plan, more teams to train. But for the first time since that humiliating day at Gate 34, she felt not only heard, but powerful. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the takeoff. A week after the board's unanimous vote, Jasmine Cole stood at the heart of Blue Horizon Air's corporate training center in Dallas. The bright, modern facility featured large glass windows, a sprawling lounge with charging stations, and rows of training rooms equipped with digital projectors and conference tables. It was here that the full-scale rollout of the CLEAR initiative would begin, and Jasmine, though just 17, was about to lead one of the most important orientation sessions of her life. She adjusted the collar of her navy blazer and glanced down at the printed schedule in her hands. 35 employees from departments across the airline had flown in to attend: gate agents, flight attendants, customer service leads, and even a few maintenance supervisors. The goal was simple: make CLEAR not just another training requirement, but something that sparked meaningful reflection and lasting change. Angela Cole, Jasmine's mother, had flown in to quietly observe from the back row. As a former nonprofit director, she knew the challenges of getting people to open up about difficult subjects. She offered her daughter a small smile from behind her notebook. At precisely 9 a.m., Jasmine walked to the front of the room. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice clear but calm. "Thank you for being here. I want to start by saying this isn't your typical training session. You won't just be checking boxes or watching outdated videos. Today is about looking inward, asking ourselves how we show up, for each other, and for the people we serve." Some participants sat stiffly, arms crossed. Others nodded, pens ready. Jasmine wasn't naive. She knew that some employees had been skeptical, even resistant. But she also believed that change had to start with honest conversation. She continued, "CLEAR stands for compassion, listening, education, awareness, and respect. It was built not from policy documents or legal templates, but from lived experience, mine, and the stories of so many others." Then she told them what had happened at Gate 34. Not the version on social media. Not the version tucked into executive memos. But her version: the look on Gloria's face, the tearing of the ticket, the silence of the crowd, the weight of being judged before she even said a word. There was no drama in her tone, only quiet resolve. By the time she finished, the room had shifted. Shoulders relaxed. Eyes lifted. Even the most skeptical among them seemed to understand, this wasn't a PR stunt. This was a human being, standing in front of them, asking them to be better. The session unfolded through interactive workshops. One involved reviewing video reenactments of customer service interactions, some positive, some laced with subtle bias. In small groups, employees discussed what they saw, how the situations could have been handled differently, and how unconscious assumptions might affect daily decisions. In another exercise, participants wrote down a moment when they felt judged or unseen in their own lives. They weren't required to share, but several volunteered. A Latina gate agent from Miami described being constantly mistaken for a cleaning staff member despite wearing her uniform. A white male mechanic admitted he used to roll his eyes at passengers who didn't speak English, until he traveled abroad himself and realized how hard it was to navigate unfamiliar airports. The conversations were honest, uncomfortable at times, but also freeing. People weren't being lectured, they were being invited. Over lunch, Jasmine sat with two flight attendants, Maria and Dwayne. Maria had been in the pilot program and was now an unofficial ambassador for CLEAR. "I'll be honest," Maria said between bites of her sandwich, "when I first heard we were doing bias training, I thought, here comes another corporate checklist. But this feels different. Dwayne nodded. I had no idea how much I needed this until I sat through that first session. There were habits I didn't even realize I had, like greeting certain passengers more warmly than others, based on how they looked. Jasmine smiled. That's the kind of awareness that makes a real difference. Later that afternoon, she met briefly with the regional HR director, Carla Monroe, who had been overseeing the implementation in the southern region. You're doing something special here, Carla told her. I've sat through dozens of compliance trainings in my career. This is the first one that's felt alive. Jasmine appreciated the praise, but she also knew it wasn't about her. It was about creating something that could live beyond her presence, something sustainable. Back in Atlanta, Elliot Cole was managing the other side of the rollout, logistics, budget approvals, and corporate communications. As CEO, he could have easily taken the spotlight. But true to form, he stayed in the background, letting Jasmine's leadership shine. He fielded a call from Cynthia Rhodes, the board member who had initially questioned the feasibility of the program. I've reviewed the first wave of reports, Cynthia said. The feedback is stronger than we expected. And Jasmine, she's commanding respect in a room full of seasoned professionals. You must be proud. I am, Elliot said simply. But more than that, I'm hopeful. She's reaching people in a way no executive memo ever could. The following week, Jasmine traveled to Blue Horizon's West Coast hub in Los Angeles. The crowd there was larger, nearly 60 employees, and more diverse in roles. This time, she opened with a story not about herself, but about a passenger. She told them about a man named Malik, who had written to the airline years ago. He was a disabled veteran who had felt brushed aside while trying to get gate assistance for his service dog. No one had been intentionally rude, but no one had truly seen him either. That story never made headlines, Jasmine said. It never went viral. But that kind of experience happens every day. And it's just as damaging as the dramatic ones. After the session, an older employee named Tom approached her. He'd worked for the airline since 1986. I'll admit, he said, when I heard about all this, I rolled my eyes. Thought it was a generational thing. But now, I think maybe I've been asleep at the wheel a bit. I want to do better. Jasmine shook his hand. That's all any of us can ask for. As the weeks passed, Clear spread across Blue Horizon's domestic hubs. Online modules were launched for international staff, translated into 5 languages. Employees began requesting deeper dives, sessions focused on cultural awareness, communication with neurodivergent passengers, and responding to microaggressions in real time. Jasmine worked closely with Kayla and Devin to adapt the curriculum, holding nightly Zoom calls, brainstorming from different time zones, and leaning on each other for energy. It wasn't easy. She was still juggling school assignments, college applications, and moments when the weight of it all felt too heavy. But then an email would arrive, like the one from a gate agent in Detroit who said the training helped him reconcile with a coworker he'd avoided for years, or a voicemail from a mother whose son with autism had been treated with rare compassion at check-in. Every story reaffirmed Jasmine's resolve. One day, as she returned to Atlanta after a training session in Chicago, she passed through the same terminal where her ticket had once been ripped in half. She stood quietly by gate 34 for a moment, watching as passengers lined up, as announcements crackled over the intercom. There was a new agent at the desk, a younger woman with a kind face, who greeted passengers with warmth and clarity. Jasmine smiled faintly. Things hadn't changed overnight, but they were changing. That evening, she sat with Elliot in his study, both of them reviewing a thick binder of data from the first 3 months of the Clear rollout. Survey scores, employee testimonials, and early signs of improvement in customer satisfaction scores. This is real, Elliot said. You've built something that's shifting culture, not just policy. Jasmine leaned back in the leather chair, tired but content. I think we're just getting started. And she meant it. Because Clear wasn't a campaign, it was a foundation. And for Jasmine Cole, what began with a torn ticket had turned into a legacy of compassion, one training session at a time. The autumn sun filtered through the windows of Jasmine Cole's high school library as she sat tucked into a quiet corner, her laptop open and notebook pages scattered with notes, outlines, and to-do lists. Despite the steady hum of students working around her, Jasmine was laser-focused. Since the launch of Clear, the airline's internal response had been overwhelming, and mostly positive. But Jasmine wasn't ready to stop at internal change. She had begun to wonder, could the impact stretch further, beyond Blue Horizon Air? Could Clear become a blueprint for change across the entire airline industry? That thought had been growing for weeks, especially after she received a letter from a retired pilot who had once flown for another major airline. "I read about the Clear program in Aviation Digest," the letter read. "What you're doing is long overdue. The culture in aviation needs a shakeup, and you might just be the one to do it." The note had been mailed to the airline's main office, but Elliot Cole had delivered it directly into his daughter's hands with a smile that said he believed every word. Jasmine folded the letter neatly and tucked it into her notebook, a reminder of both encouragement and responsibility. It was no longer just about her personal experience at Gate 34. It was about transforming how the industry valued respect, dignity, and understanding at every level. Back at Blue Horizon headquarters, the company was entering a new phase. Clear had already been implemented across all U.S. operations. The next step was global. Elliot, Angela, and a growing team of advisors were preparing for the challenge of adapting the program to different cultural contexts. Training materials had to be translated not just linguistically, but also socially. During a leadership meeting, Jasmine stood before a digital map of Blue Horizon's 62 international hubs. "I don't want us to just copy and paste Clear into other regions," she told the group. "We need to listen. We need to understand the local experiences of bias and respect, because they look different in Tokyo than they do in Sao Paulo or Johannesburg." One of the senior vice presidents, a tall man named Daniel Meacham, raised a thoughtful question. "So you're proposing regional advisory groups?" "Yes," Jasmine answered without hesitation. "We'll invite local staff to help tailor each module. They'll advise on examples, case studies, even body language and tone, so that the training feels relevant, not imposed." The room nodded in agreement. Meacham smiled. "You really are building this from the inside out." With the board's blessing, Jasmine and her peers launched Clear Global, starting with Europe and Southeast Asia. Devon and Kayla led regional meetings online, while Jasmine flew with her father to London and Singapore, speaking with airport managers and employee reps. It was her first time flying internationally in a leadership capacity, and though she still dressed modestly, blazer, slacks, flats, people took notice. In Singapore, she met with a young gate agent named Alia, who shared a story that mirrored Jasmine's own, being singled out at a gate because of her hijab and accent. She had never reported it, unsure anyone would listen. But now, Alia said, eyes shining, "It feels like someone finally sees us." In London, a customer service manager told Jasmine how British passengers sometimes treated his African staff with subtle condescension, and how frontline employees didn't always feel empowered to respond. "It's never overt racism," he said. "But it's those tiny slights, the "you people" comments, the assumptions, they build up." Jasmine listened carefully and took notes, adding their stories to her growing collection of testimonials. These weren't just accounts of discrimination, they were blueprints for solutions. Meanwhile, the media had started paying closer attention. Clear had been featured in Forbes, NPR, and Travel Weekly. Though Jasmine had initially avoided the spotlight, she agreed to a few interviews, careful to keep the focus on the mission rather than herself. In one segment on Good Morning America, the host asked her, "You're just 17. How does it feel to be driving change in an entire industry?" Jasmine smiled modestly. "Honestly, I'm just trying to make sure no one else feels the way I did that day at the gate. If we can make one person feel seen, heard, and respected, that's worth it." Back at school, her classmates treated her the same way they always had, maybe with a little more curiosity, maybe asking for help with college essays or presentations. But Jasmine remained grounded. She still went to debate club, helped with student council, and volunteered at the local community center on Saturdays. One rainy Saturday in October, Jasmine sat in the multipurpose room of the community center helping a middle schooler named Tiana write a speech for her civics class. The topic? What does fairness mean? Jasmine smiled when she saw the title. That's a big question. Tiana shrugged. I dunno, maybe it just means treating people like they matter. Exactly, Jasmine said softly. You'd be surprised how many adults haven't figured that out yet. Later that night, she told her mother about it while they folded laundry. Do you ever feel like it's too much? Angela asked gently. The pressure, the expectations. Sometimes, Jasmine admitted. But I also feel like I'm in the right place. Like everything that's happened led me here. Angela touched her hand. Then that's your answer. By November, Clear Global had reached 6 countries and trained over 3,000 employees. Exit surveys showed a 93% satisfaction rate. More importantly, internal reports revealed a 27% decrease in customer complaints related to staff behavior. While not perfect, the results were clear, people were responding. At a company-wide summit held in Atlanta, Elliot delivered the opening remarks, but the most anticipated speech came from Jasmine. She stood confidently at the podium in front of hundreds of Blue Horizon staff, board members, and international partners. When I walked into Gate 34 that day, I felt small, she began. I felt like my voice didn't matter. But I learned something, that even when someone tries to take away your dignity, you still get to choose how you respond. And I chose to build something. Not for revenge, but for change. The audience rose in a standing ovation. That evening, as the summit closed, Jasmine and Elliot stood near the tall windows overlooking the runway. Planes came and went, headlights cutting through the dusk. You know, Elliot said, when I first built this company, I dreamed of growth, more routes, more jets, more customers. But I never imagined the most important thing we'd build wouldn't be on a tarmac. It'd be this. Jasmine looked up at him. We're still building. He smiled. Yes, we are. The next morning, Jasmine received an invitation that would mark the next phase of her journey. The U.S. Department of Transportation had asked her to join a youth advisory panel on transportation equity, her first role in shaping public policy. She read the email twice, barely believing it. She forwarded it to Devin and Kayla with the subject line, "Let's go bigger." Later that week, she returned to Gate 34, not as a passenger, not as a victim, but as a quiet visitor. The area had changed. New signage, improved lighting, and a plaque recognizing Blue Horizon's commitment to inclusion and respect. She stood to the side, watching a young girl with braids like hers walk up to the counter with her mother. This time, the agent smiled warmly and scanned their tickets without a second glance. Jasmine exhaled, deeply, peacefully. She knew that not every story would end like hers. But she also knew that every small change, every training session, every conversation, every act of standing up, was one step closer to fairness. And that was enough to keep going. By early December, the temperature in Atlanta had dropped just enough to coat the city in a soft chill, and Jasmine Cole's schedule was packed tighter than ever. Between college applications, final exams, and a growing number of speaking requests, she found herself navigating two very different worlds, one of a high school senior and another of an industry changemaker. And as the holiday season approached, another major milestone was on the horizon, the full integration of the CLEAR program across every Blue Horizon department, including upper management and corporate leadership. For Jasmine, this next phase was the most critical. This is where it either becomes permanent, she told her father one evening, or fades into a remember when. Elliot Cole, seated across the dining table with his laptop open and glasses perched on the tip of his nose, nodded thoughtfully. And we're not letting it fade. The new challenge wasn't resistance, it was complacency. After months of praise, positive feedback, and media attention, some executives had begun treating Clear as a job well done instead of a movement still in motion. Jasmine understood the risk. Institutional change could stall if leadership grew too comfortable. So she decided to shake things up. The next morning, she sent an internal memo, clear, concise, and powerful, inviting senior executives to attend a new session called Leadership in Practice. This wasn't just about reviewing policies or watching training videos. Jasmine had designed the session to mirror real-life challenges, forcing leaders to reflect on how they influenced culture from the top down. The invite list included Elliot himself, along with CFO Martin Green, COO Lydia Park, and several high-ranking directors. To Jasmine's surprise, every single one RSVP'd yes. The session was held in the airline's executive boardroom, a room Jasmine had walked into only once before, but now she was standing at the head of the table, not as a guest, but as a facilitator. "Welcome," she said, looking around at the long oak table surrounded by executives in tailored suits. "I appreciate your time. Today isn't about looking backward, it's about asking what kind of legacy we're building." She handed out a packet of real anonymous employee feedback, taken from surveys and exit interviews collected over the past year. Some comments were uplifting. Others were brutally honest. "My manager says the right things but doesn't act on them. I feel like inclusion is a trend, once the headlines fade, so will the training. I love working here, but I wish leadership knew our names." Jasmine gave them a moment to read, watching their expressions shift, some grew solemn, others deeply reflective. Then she posed the question, "How are you showing up for your people?" The room was silent at first. Then Lydia Park, a woman known for her sharp mind and intense work ethic, raised her hand. "I didn't realize how detached I'd become from the culture we say we want," she admitted. "I spend more time reviewing data than listening to the people behind the numbers." That broke the dam. One by one, the executives shared their own blind spots. Martin Green spoke of his assumptions about younger employees lacking professional maturity. Another leader admitted she avoided hiring conversations about equity out of fear of saying the wrong thing. Jasmine didn't judge. She guided. She reminded them that leadership wasn't about having all the answers, it was about being willing to learn. By the end of the session, something shifted. Elliot, who had remained mostly quiet throughout, stood and addressed the room. "I founded Blue Horizon to be different," he said. "But I've come to realize that difference doesn't just come from strategy or innovation. It comes from humility. From listening to voices like Jasmine's, and acting on them." A round of nods followed. Some clapped quietly. That afternoon, the board approved a new phase of Clear, a leadership accountability framework. It included quarterly listening sessions, anonymous employee feedback loops, and a diversity and inclusion scorecard that would now be part of every department head's annual review. Jasmine had learned by now that change didn't happen with one big gesture. It came from layering policy over culture, conversation over silence, and courage over convenience. Later that week, she joined Devin and Kayla for a virtual town hall to present the expanded Clear model to thousands of employees tuning in from around the world. It was the largest event they had ever hosted. "Clear was never meant to end with training," Devin said, opening the call. "It's about building a culture where doing the right thing isn't exceptional, it's expected," Kayla added. Jasmine smiled as she leaned into the camera. "We're not checking a box. We're drawing a blueprint for how companies, and the people inside them, can grow together." The live chat buzzed with messages of support from employees across continents, cabin crew in Johannesburg, customer service reps in Toronto, engineers in Sydney. One message read, "My 14-year-old daughter watched your story on the news. She said she wants to work for Blue Horizon someday. Not just because of the planes, but because of the people." As the event ended, Jasmine felt the full weight of that impact. She wasn't doing this for the praise, or even the recognition. She was doing it because people were watching. Learning. Hoping. That weekend, she and her family took a break, just a simple getaway to a lakeside cabin 2 hours north of the city. No laptops. No agendas. Just board games, hot cocoa, and walks by the water. Elliot grilled burgers on the deck while Angela curled up by the fire with a book. Jasmine sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky turn orange over the lake. It was peaceful, but her mind was still stirring. On the drive home, she turned to her parents in the front seat. "I've been thinking," she said. "What if CLEAR isn't just for airlines? What if we built a version for schools, hospitals, even law enforcement? Bias isn't limited to one industry." Elliot glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You're thinking long-term." "I guess I am." Angela smiled. "That's what changemakers do." The next Monday, Jasmine returned to her usual routine: backpacks, math tests, lunchtime debates. But now, in the background, she began mapping out the next step: a non-profit foundation. Its mission would be to expand CLEAR principles beyond the walls of Blue Horizon, into places where equity and compassion were needed most. By mid-January, she had filed the paperwork to register the CLEAR Foundation, with Kayla and Devin as co-founders. And as the new year unfolded, something became undeniably clear: Jasmine's torn ticket was never just a moment of injustice. It was the spark for a movement, one that had begun inside a corporate boardroom and now reached far beyond it, into hearts, homes, and futures still being written. By the time February arrived, Jasmine Cole was navigating a pace of life most adults would find exhausting. Between school responsibilities, the formal launch of the CLEAR Foundation, and her advisory role at Blue Horizon, her calendar looked more like that of a CEO than a high school senior. But Jasmine never complained. She'd grown into her role as a young leader with grace, never losing sight of the moment that started it all, that humiliating day at Gate 34. The CLEAR Foundation began to gain traction quickly. The mission was simple but powerful: to bring the principles of empathy, equity, and accountability into other industries beyond aviation. Jasmine, alongside Kayla and Devin, began piloting community partnerships, starting small, with local schools and civic groups in Atlanta. One of their first initiatives was a youth-led workshop series called Clear Voices, where students could talk openly about how discrimination and unconscious bias affected them at school. They partnered with the city's Department of Education to roll it out in 5 middle schools and 3 high schools. During one session at Southside High, a young boy named Aaron shared that he often felt labeled as aggressive just because he was outspoken in class. "My teachers act like I'm a problem before I even speak," he said quietly. Jasmine, sitting in the circle with him, nodded. "I know that feeling. And you're not the problem, Aaron. The problem is how people choose to see you." The room fell silent, then slowly began to fill with nods and quiet affirmations. Jasmine's ability to connect, to make others feel seen, remained her greatest strength. Meanwhile, at Blue Horizon, the airline was preparing for its annual State of the Company address, and this year, Elliot Cole made an unorthodox move. He invited Jasmine to deliver the closing remarks. "This company was born out of my dreams," Elliot told her as they walked through the halls of the headquarters, "but it's grown into something even better because of yours." The event was held at the Grand Hyatt in downtown Atlanta. Over 2,000 employees, stakeholders, and media representatives packed the ballroom. The room was lit with cool blue tones, and a model of one of the company's newest planes sat in the corner, surrounded by banners showcasing the CLEAR initiative and the company's record-high employee satisfaction scores. Elliot gave his speech first, steady, confident, visionary as always. He spoke of growth, resilience during the post-pandemic years, and the airline's renewed commitment to inclusion and respect. Then, with a smile that blended both paternal pride and professional admiration, he introduced Jasmine. She stepped onto the stage in a tailored blazer and slacks, her hair pulled back neatly, holding her notes, but not needing to look at them. "When I was 17, she began, her voice clear through the mic, "I had a valid boarding pass, and someone ripped it in half because they didn't believe I belonged. That moment could have broken me. But instead, it lit a fire. She took a slow breath and scanned the room. That fire became a program, which became a movement, which is now becoming a model for change in schools, nonprofits, and eventually, if we keep at it, across every industry that serves people. Applause echoed across the room. Jasmine continued. We all have blind spots. But we also have choices. And when we choose to listen, to act, and to lead with integrity, we don't just fix policies, we change lives. The standing ovation lasted a full minute. Afterward, dozens of employees approached her, mechanics, pilots, HR leads, and even a janitor who shyly handed her a note thanking her for reminding the company what real respect looks like. The media coverage was immediate. The Wall Street Journal published a feature titled, "The 17-Year-Old Who Redefined Corporate Training," while CNN's evening segment showcased clips of the speech alongside interviews with employees from Blue Horizon's international hubs. That same week, Jasmine received an invitation to speak at the National Diversity Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C. It would be her first national stage outside the airline industry. Elliot and Angela sat with her as she reviewed the email. You've earned this, Angela said. You're helping people think bigger, and that matters. Jasmine nodded, thoughtful. I just don't want this to become about me. It was never about spotlight. It was about impact. Her father leaned forward. That's why the spotlight doesn't scare me. You're not using it to be seen, you're using it to shine light on what matters. The forum was held in late March, just as the cherry blossoms began blooming in D.C. Jasmine, Kayla, and Devin flew in together, all three wearing matching clear foundation pins on their lapels. The event drew leaders from Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, education sectors, and grassroots organizations. The air was charged with ambition and activism. During a panel titled, Youth-Driven Change, Jasmine spoke alongside a young woman working on prison reform and a college student advocating for accessible healthcare. When asked about the most surprising thing she'd learned through CLEAR, Jasmine paused for a moment before answering. I used to think that change started with the people in power, she said. Now I know it starts with the person who speaks up when something's wrong, no matter where they sit. Her words were met with thoughtful silence, followed by a ripple of applause. After the session, an executive from a major hotel chain approached her. We've been trying to address bias in our guest services for years, he said. I think CLEAR could be the framework we've been missing. That moment marked the beginning of another branch of expansion, CLEAR for Hospitality. Back in Atlanta, Jasmine met with her foundation team and began working on a new sector-specific curriculum. Her model was simple but scalable. Each new version of CLEAR would be co-developed with frontline workers in that industry, just as they had done at Blue Horizon. There would be no one-size-fits-all, but the core values remained unchanged: compassion, listening, education, awareness, respect. Around this time, Jasmine also received word from the airline's HR department. Gloria, the gate agent who had originally torn up her ticket, had officially resigned after being on leave for over a year. The report noted that she had not completed her required CLEAR training and had chosen not to return. Jasmine read the memo in silence. She didn't feel vindictive or triumphant, only quiet resolution. I hope she's learning somewhere else, she said aloud to no one in particular. Later that evening, she wrote about it in her journal, the same one she carried with her the day of the incident. She flipped back through old pages, sketches of CLEAR's logo, early notes about training modules, quotes from her father. One page stood out. It was from the night she'd first sat in the airport lounge after the incident. She had written, "If I can turn this pain into something useful, maybe it won't have been wasted." She underlined it now. Twice. That spring, the CLEAR Foundation rolled out pilot programs in 3 new sectors: hospitality, education, and local government offices. Word of mouth from Blue Horizon employees spread quickly, and soon, companies were calling them to request consultations. In May, as Jasmine gave her valedictorian speech at her high school graduation, she looked out at the crowd, not just classmates and teachers, but Blue Horizon employees, community leaders, and her foundation team sitting proudly in the bleachers. "I used to think leadership meant standing at the front of the room," she told the crowd. "But I've learned it really means standing beside others, lifting them up when they've been pushed down. It means making room, sharing space, and never forgetting where you started." As tassels were turned and caps flew into the air, Jasmine knew this wasn't a closing chapter, it was a runway. Clear had started as a response to injustice. But now, it was becoming a national model for how compassion could be taught, accountability could be structured, and dignity could be restored, one story, one conversation, one decision at a time. The summer after graduation arrived with the scent of magnolia in the air and a feeling of change on the wind. Jasmine Cole, now 18, stood at the threshold of a new chapter in life, not just one of college and adulthood, but of deepening purpose. While many of her peers were packing for dorm rooms or backpacking through Europe, Jasmine remained grounded in Atlanta for one reason: the national rollout of the Clear Foundation's newest initiative, Clear Cities. The program was ambitious. Built on the Foundation's core principles, compassion, listening, education, awareness, and respect, it aimed to embed inclusive leadership training into local governments, community programs, and even public safety agencies. Jasmine believed this was where the next frontier of change had to occur, within the systems people interacted with daily, where equity wasn't just a slogan, but a lifeline. She met weekly with city council members, public defenders, social workers, and police liaisons. The conversations were sometimes strained, sometimes hopeful, but always real. In early July, she was invited to a town hall meeting in Macon, Georgia, a city grappling with tensions between its police department and historically black neighborhoods. Community trust was frayed. Past initiatives had failed. Jasmine was nervous. This wasn't a corporate boardroom or a school gymnasium. This was generational pain, systemic distrust, and a crowd tired of promises. As she stepped up to the microphone in the packed community center, folding chairs filled with concerned residents, elders, pastors, and youth organizers, Jasmine paused for a moment before speaking. "I'm not here to fix everything," she said plainly. "But I am here to listen. And to help build something better, with you, not for you." That shifted the room. People leaned in. She shared stories, of Aaron from the school workshop, of Alia in Singapore, and of herself at Gate 34. Then she introduced the Clear Cities pilot, a 6-month program tailored to the community, led by local voices, and backed by national resources. The idea was to create safe spaces for dialogue, healing circles, and training sessions across city departments, from libraries to sanitation crews. After the meeting, a retired schoolteacher approached her. "I didn't think I'd be moved by another young person with a microphone," she said with a chuckle. "But you've got something different. You're not here to be seen. You're here to see." Jasmine smiled, deeply humbled. "That's all I've ever wanted to do." Back in Atlanta, the Clear Foundation's small office buzzed with momentum. Now operating out of a donated loft space in Midtown, the team had grown to include 10 staff members, most under 30, and a dozen volunteers rotating in and out. Devin had taken on the role of Director of Program Strategy, while Kayla led partnerships and outreach. Jasmine focused on vision, storytelling, and leadership development. They launched a summer intensive for high school juniors called Voices in Flight, a nod to the Foundation's roots. Students from all over the country, Chicago, Oakland, Memphis, Tulsa, gathered for 2 weeks to learn about social impact work, design their own micro-projects, and engage in guided dialogue on race, gender, and identity. One student, Ava from Milwaukee, had been quiet for days until the group's 3rd session. During a workshop on lived experience, she stood up and said, "People don't always think of girls like me as leaders. But I think that's their mistake." The room erupted in snaps and applause. Jasmine, watching from the side, felt her chest tighten, not from anxiety, but from something else, awe. She was no longer the only spark. She had lit a torch that others now carried. Meanwhile, Elliot continued to play a supportive but steady role. As Blue Horizon CEO, he had appointed a Chief Inclusion Officer, a role that Jasmine helped design, to ensure clear values remained a core part of company culture long after she moved on. The airline's customer satisfaction scores had improved steadily over the year, and more importantly, employee turnover had dropped significantly, especially among frontline staff. One afternoon in August, Jasmine met with Elliot in his office, something they did often now, as equals more than father and daughter. On his desk sat a letter stamped with the seal of the White House. "You might want to read this," Elliot said, sliding it across. Jasmine opened the envelope with curiosity and scanned the first lines. Her eyes widened. It was an invitation. The President's Office of Public Engagement was hosting a national summit on civic inclusion, and Jasmine had been selected to co-chair a roundtable discussion on youth-led movements in America. "They want to hear your story," Elliot said softly. "And they want to learn how to replicate CLEAR's impact in other federal departments." Jasmine sat back in her chair, stunned. "From Gate 34 to the White House," she whispered. Elliot grinned. "I'd say that's a decent flight path." The summit was scheduled for late September, just before Jasmine would begin her first semester at Emory University, where she'd been accepted into a special dual program combining public policy and nonprofit leadership. She would be staying in Atlanta, close to her foundation, close to her family, and close to the communities she was helping to transform. When the day arrived, she walked through the doors of the Eisenhower Executive Office building just off the West Wing with quiet determination. Wearing a navy suit and her signature CLEAR pin, she took her place at the table alongside senior government officials, nonprofit founders, and fellow young activists from across the country. Her opening remarks were broadcast to thousands watching online. "We talk a lot about policy," she began, "but policy without empathy is just paperwork. What we need are systems that reflect the people they serve. Systems that listen. That's what CLEAR is about, not just checking boxes, but changing hearts." Over the next 2 hours, Jasmine helped facilitate a discussion that ranged from education reform to mental health equity to community policing. Her ability to connect dots, to weave people's personal stories into broader societal insights, drew praise from all corners. When it was over, a senior advisor to the president approached her. "You don't speak like someone your age," he said. "You speak like someone who's been doing this for decades." Jasmine smiled. Some lessons don't wait for decades. The summit became a catalyst for new federal conversations around youth-led initiatives. Jasmine was asked to consult on a pilot project for inclusive training within the Department of Transportation. It was another step forward, one she would walk into not as a student activist, but as a respected voice. Back in Atlanta, the foundation continued to grow. They received a major grant from the Ford Foundation, allowing them to expand CLEAR cities into 4 new municipalities by the end of the year. The youth summer program was scheduled to double in size next season. And more than anything, the community was responding, not just with applause, but with action. In October, Jasmine was invited back to her old high school to speak at an alumni event. As she walked the familiar halls, memories rushed in, sitting in the library corner with her notebook, nervously making her first clear outlines, dreaming of making things better. She stepped onto the stage of the school auditorium where her journey had truly begun. "I want to leave you with this," she told the students gathered. "Don't wait for permission to make something right. You don't need a title, or a budget, or a full plan. You just need a voice, and the courage to use it." The applause was thunderous. But Jasmine wasn't looking for praise. She was watching the eyes of the students, wide, inspired, burning with the same spark she once carried alone. Now, it belonged to many. That night, as she sat in her bedroom, a candle flickering beside her laptop, she wrote in her journal. Gate 34 was never just a gate. It was a door. And every day, we're helping more people walk through it, toward a future that sees them, values them, and lifts them up. And with that, Jasmine closed her journal, ready for whatever came next. Not because her journey was over, but because it was just beginning, again. In life, dignity can be torn apart in a moment, but so can change be sparked in an instant. Jasmine's story reminds us that no matter how young or underestimated we are, our voices can challenge injustice and build something bigger than ourselves. Real leadership doesn't require power, it requires courage, compassion, and the will to listen when others look away. Whether you're standing at an airport gate or a city council meeting, never forget that change begins with those who dare to speak up. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, it helps us share more stories that matter. Leave a comment below and tell us, when was a time you stood up for something that felt bigger than you? We'd love to hear your voice. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our storytelling family. Together, let's keep these stories alive, and let them light the way forward.